Hi, I'm Stuart Yasgur, and welcome to Economic Architecture. For this week's episode, we're stepping away from our recent focus on wildfires and resilience to focus on another very important aspect of housing, specifically the access to affordable housing. According to the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University, 42.9 million households across the United States are cost burdened. That means that more than 1 out of 3 households in the United States pay more than 30% of their income just to put a roof over their heads. At the same time, according to LendingTree, there are nearly 15 million vacant homes in the United States. There is an especially high proportion of vacant buildings in cities like Baltimore, which has around 15,000 vacant buildings. These buildings are mostly concentrated in historically black neighborhoods across the city, which is a reflection of the legacy of racialized policies, including urban renewal and redlining. At this point, it's a national crisis.
I was like, really, I was resisting it for a long time. Are you sure, Bree? Like, you have this really great job on Wall Street. Are you sure you want to do this crazy thing?
This was a special conversation with Bree this week. Bree Jones, the founder and CEO of Parity Homes, is a genuine innovator. She combines the big vision to see solutions with a disciplined focus to create concrete examples of real change. Parity Homes is an organization seeking to spark upfront demand of affordable housing by creating new pathways to greater accessibility. And she's done the hard work to figure out how to do this at scale.
Housing is a universal crisis and it's a universal right. And I think that is like a way that we can scale our work that's not super capital intensive. Affordable housing is not just a matter of the developer making the house affordable, because that is a lever, but you also need people to have access to good paying jobs and to have access to jobs, period.
Bree was actually the spotlight innovator from the first Valuing Homes in Black Communities challenge we ran in partnership with the Brookings Institution. And we've known each other for more than 5 years now. In today's conversation, Bree invites us in, and she walks us through her own thoughtful and intentional journey developing an innovative approach that can help address the housing crisis. Hello, Bree. It's so good to see you. Thank you for joining us here today.
Hi, Stuart. Yes, anytime. I love economic architecture. I love the work that you guys are doing. So I'm so honored to be invited, and I'll come back a million times, as many times as you need me to.
That's fantastic. We're definitely inviting you back. Part of our goal for today is to understand Parity Homes and the work you're doing. Would you be willing to start us off and take us all the way back? Where did it start? What was the day that you had the idea to start Parity Homes?
Yeah, so this would take us back to about 2012, 2013. I was a young, recent college grad, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to start my new life as a young adult in corporate America. And I actually was working on Wall Street, was doing really well, young 24 something year old, like just really excelling and growing and doing really well in that profession. But around that time, Trayvon Martin was murdered. And for me, that was very much so like my George Floyd moment. And it just catalyzed me in so many ways. And it just opened my eyes to the experience, at least for Black Americans, that we have in this country, like the assumption that we don't belong where we belong. Because if folks recall, Trayvon Martin was walking home, he was in his community, walking from the corner store back home, and his killer targeted him thinking that he was, I don't know, doing something illegal. And that kind of just really sat with me because it made me realize that even though I was like upwardly mobile, a young Black woman on Wall Street, individually making really good money, that I saw Trayvon Martin as like my future son or like my little brother. It doesn't actually matter if you're economically doing well, if you're still living in a country that by default assumes that you are the enemy or assumes you shouldn't be there. And how important is it that Black folks have community and they have access to space that actually was built for them and that wants them to be there and assumes that they should be there. So all of this was going on, and then this dovetails with gentrification that I started to experience in real time in New York. Gentrification had been happening in New York for a long time in Brooklyn and in Harlem, but it took its time to get to the Bronx and Westchester County, which is where like all of my formative years were while I was going through this internal revolution with Trayvon Martin's murder, I was seeing also in real time that like people that I grew up with and neighborhoods that I had traversed for years, people were getting pushed out. The neighborhood was changing and it was gentrifying. And I just felt all of these like feelings all at once. And I was just being called or pushed to ask myself, what can I do about this? I had always wanted to start my own business. I had that entrepreneurial bug since I was a little girl, but I didn't know what I wanted to start a business in or on. And it dawned on me that was what I was being called to do, was to create space where we could do development in another way that didn't push people out, and we could do development in a way that actually centered the outcomes of residents who were there before, particularly Black Americans. 2018 is when I like really decided that I was going to embark on that journey. January 2020, I like incorporated the company. Granted, COVID was just a few months away, but I haven't looked back ever since.
Can you fill in the gap going from New York to Baltimore? Because Parody Homes starts in Baltimore.
That is, yes, that's correct. So I got my feet wet by doing my first project in New York. So I have been saving up to buy my first home. I have been living with my mom up until 26, 27 years old, which thank you, mom, because that helped me save and all the good things. But I decided instead of using my savings to buy my own home, like where I would live, I bought one of the last vacant, dilapidated buildings in the community and did a full gut renovation on that building to create perpetually affordable rental apartments for the families that were of lower incomes that I could see were being pushed out drastically. So I was able to buy that vacant property for next to nothing because at the time, like gentrification hadn't fully hit. I could see it on the horizon, but it hadn't fully hit. I was able to get that home for just about $200,000, which in New York is like unheard of. And
Wow.
and I was able
Yeah.
to pass those savings along to the families who, still to this day, they still live there. I have not raised rents in what has it been 8 years. I tried to go do the next building, and within about a year's time, the values in the neighborhood had quadrupled. So it went from a $200,000 home to the houses in that neighborhood being sold for
Wow.
$800,000 and up. And I just could not, I was immediately priced out. I just couldn't afford to be getting into bidding wars with speculators who were paying all cash and paying over asking. And pushed out
Right.
of New York, essentially, I said, okay, where can I do this? Like, where can I do this at scale where I'm not going to have to be battling people with deeper pockets? And that is what kind of formed my thesis that I actually, in order to do this work at scale, you have to get ahead of gentrification. You have to get ahead of markets that are already hot, and you have to, which means you have to be in markets that are cold. And what are markets that are cold? Markets with high
Right.
rates of vacancy. And that's where I started. Did some research, like top 10 cities with the highest percentage of vacant properties: Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, Cleveland, Memphis. But Baltimore, the rest is history. I drove down to Baltimore, and I just remember driving into the city and feeling like I'm home. It reminds me so much of New York. They're kindred spirits. The architecture in New York, we have the brownstone. In Baltimore, they have the row home. But it's a warm city. It's just a really warm, resilient, gritty city. But there's also a lot of economic reasons that I made the decision for Baltimore. Affordable housing is not just a matter of the developer making the house affordable, because that is a lever, but you also need
Right.
people to have access to good paying jobs and to have access to jobs, period. And that was the one thing about
Right.
Detroit, which no shade to Detroit, because there's a lot of great things about Detroit, but with the loss of the car manufacturers, it just being in like a monolithic like economic producer with cars, it just puts the populace in a little bit of limbo. If that leaves, then where do the jobs go? Whereas Baltimore is such a strong
Right.
economic center.
I also don't think people understand just what the housing market looks like in Baltimore because you talk
Mhm.
about the housing market in New York and like from one year to the next, prices going up four
Hmm.
times, which is
Right.
insane. But in Baltimore, the market's totally different. Like the number of homes that are available. Can you help people picture what the housing looks like in Baltimore?
So we have 15,000 vacant buildings in Baltimore and 23,000 vacant lots,
I
and they
mean,
are mostly concentrated in historically Black communities. And this is a derivative or a remnant of racialized policies, whether it's redlining, which I would hope everybody who's listening to this knows what redlining is, urban renewal, which Robert Moses was like the kind of pioneer of urban renewal in this country and basically gutting Black communities and demolishing Black communities to make way for highways. So, actually, in the neighborhood that we're working in, it's dissected or bisected by a highway that Robert Moses helped build. He wasn't just in New York, that he did his work across the country. Eminent domain, blockbusting, just decimated these communities. So 15,000 vacant buildings, 23,000 vacant lots. And yeah, we're just trying to revitalize the neighborhood. But hyper vacancy is it's very difficult. It's a very tricky housing stock, but I think we've figured out the pieces of the puzzle to make this work at scale.
and you've been incredibly powerful at helping people recognize opportunities where they weren't seeing them before, where they were just seeing
Mhm.
all the problems piling up one after another.
Yeah,
He,
the first thing I'll share is that I am like really excited about the about vacants because nationally, I think we have a deficit of about 3 million homes. We need 3 million more homes or more units to meet the housing crisis. But we have 6 million vacant, abandoned properties across the country. So for me, that's okay. Like that's an interesting like phenomenon. First picture like some of the most beautifully built, architecturally rich structures in the world. Baltimore was settled by the Dutch in the early 1800s, and the Dutch were some of the most premier city planners and builders across the world. And then you have all of this beautiful masonry in the form of these row homes. That is actually the main reason why these homes are still standing to the state where the interior is collapsed and the roofs have caved in, but the brick shells are still standing because they were crafted by the most talented masonry workers, probably in the country, if not the world. So you have this really interesting juxtaposition of beautiful architecture, but boarded up windows and roofs that have collapsed and debris on the street and trees growing in the houses. We
yeah.
have the homes. If we could just bring those back online, just bring them back to productive use, then we would quickly solve the housing crisis. It's not that we don't have enough land, it's that we are not using the assets we already have. Where some would see vacancy as like a just tear it down and like just get rid of it. I see it as an opportunity for us to do really meaningful work and also really meaningful equity work. And that's the other key is that like working with vacant properties actually gives you an amazing opportunity to ensure that the end outcome of those homes, of the blocks, of the neighborhoods where you're doing that vacancy work, you can ensure that it's affordable housing. You can ensure that people aren't being displaced. Once a neighborhood's already gentrified, then you're just doing like mitigation. You're trying to lessen the harm. Whereas in cities that have hyper vacancy, you have just such an amazing opportunity to proactively get ahead of that harm and ensure that the outcomes are equitable. Um,
Yes, it's a big idea. It's a re-understanding of something we've been looking at before, but it's seeing that, okay, this is really translating into people moving into homes, and there's an ownership pathway here, not
yeah.
just for individuals, but for entire blocks and communities. And so I think it's been remarkably powerful. And that the impact of your work goes, yes, it's individuals, but it goes even more broadly than that. I think that's in your work, one of the things you help people see is also the importance of community in dealing with this. So it's not just one home at a time or one family at a time, but rather
Mhm.
how do we start to come together?
Yes, absolutely. So when I moved to Baltimore, I didn't know a single soul, but I just knew I'm going to do this, and this is like the opportunity of a lifetime. I basically just immediately tried to start raising money to buy some of the buildings and renovate them and sell them. And I went back to all my Wall Street buddies and said, "Hey, can I have $1 million to do this work?" And basically, everyone was like, no. They told me all the reasons why it wouldn't work, why Baltimore was not viable. And the feedback was like, no one wants to live there. Those were their precise words. People are fleeing, the population's going down, everything is a mess, no one wants to live there. And all I could think about was like, I want to live there. Like, I want to live there. And there must be at least 20 people like me, if not more. I could see that those investors were thinking with a traditional capitalist, anti-Black, deficit-based mindset, and that they had a huge blind spot. That was actually the best thing that could have happened to me in my entrepreneurship journey because it forced me to say, all right, big capital, if you don't think there's an opportunity here, I'm going to work with people on the ground to prove to you that there is an opportunity here. And so that's really where our collective was born. I basically talked to anyone who would listen. I gave them a picture of the block, and then I had the artist do a rendering of what the block would look like if it was renovated. And I just showed them that picture. I was like, hey, if we were able to buy every vacant building on this block, renovate it beautifully, would you want to live here? And everyone said yes. And so very quickly, we built this collective, which were people who just were basically willing to say, yep, if you give Bree this money so she can renovate this house, I will live here. And that collective, they went with me to meetings with investors. They went with me to meetings with the housing department at the city, and they were fully bought in. And some of those folks have been with me really since 2020 when I first conceptualized the idea, and now they live in a parody home. And so that allowed demonstrating that market is what kind of got us on the radar of key like philanthropists. And so our first big grant came from JP Morgan Chase in 2022, where they gave us $2 million. And that was really like the start of our work. I was able to pay myself a salary for the first time. I was able to hire team
Yep.
members. We've since acquired 50 properties and we've completed seven. We're on track to complete 20 this year. And our goal is to continue to grow our output. Our big ambitious goal is to do
That's
200
amazing.
homes per year. Now it's still a drop in the bucket, and who knows, maybe we'll do more, but 200 homes per year feels like something I can hang my hat on and I can retire at that point, hopefully just in a few years.
But we need a lot more, Bree. I don't think we're ready for you to retire yet. We're looking forward to many more years to come. That's an amazing trajectory. So you completed
Mhm.
the first seven homes, and how many of those
Yes,
seven folks were with you right from the very beginning?
pretty much all of them. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I,
All.
I remember seeing those first homes being completed and people
Mhm.
starting to move in. It was amazing. These are gorgeous homes. And if people haven't been to Baltimore, if they haven't seen the homes that you've created, they're beautiful. They're row homes.
Mhm.
There's like in neighborhoods where the infrastructure is there for public space and for
Yes,
community and for community to thrive in a way where you think this is contemporary urban
exactly.
living in a way that families can genuinely be there with community. They're amazing.
Exactly.
I think like everybody who went through the homes, this is gorgeous. I'd love to live here. And so going from seven homes to 20 homes, this is big because you're taking homes that really have been underinvested in or disinvested in for long periods of time. So there's a massive effort in bring together the people who will eventually own the homes, the
Mhm.
financing, the actual work, the redesign, the rebuilding of each of these homes. And so to go from seven to 20
Mhm.
as a brand new startup is a huge step forward.
So yeah, how do we keep going? I cannot speak enough about the importance of mentorship in this industry. But so both of my coaches or mentors are in the home building space. And I was meeting with one of them this morning, and he said that as a leader, you have two directives. The first is profit protection. He was a for profit builder. We'll cut him some slack where he might say profit protection. There is something to be said for a nonprofit about stewarding your funds correctly and making sure that you have sustainability to keep going so that you can continue to deliver your mission and your impact. So that's one. The second is developing your people. Those are the only two things as a leader that like you really have to concern yourself with. My team has been the hardest thing in the world. I had never managed before. I just did not know how to lead people. I just had an idea and I just assumed I just hire smart people and they'll figure it out and we'll just get it done. But no, you have to nurture people. You have to understand their strengths and weaknesses, and you have to help guide them to be their best selves in purpose of the work or of the mission, in service of the mission. So my growing, like over the last few years, have been getting myself and my team to this point where I feel like now we are all rowing the boat in the same direction. And it's just so exciting because I'm
Yeah.
seeing in real time how that's resulting in lower construction costs, quicker construction times, and our ability to deliver to our home buyers effectively. That's why we're able to go in 3 years from 7 homes to now 20 in 1 year. The other thing, again, back to that profit protection, is that I'm starting to raise our next tranche of funds that kind of put us into a more mature stance as an organization. We historically had been entirely
Right.
reliant on philanthropy, and that was great to get us started, but it's not how we're going to be able to scale and continue to do this work. So we're just now starting to leverage debt. And for a long time, I was debt averse. I was really afraid of debt. Like, I just did not want to be in a place where we wouldn't be able to pay our lenders back. But now at this point, we've leveraged just under $1 million of debt funding. We're about to close on our next million.
It's
And I
great.
really am excited about debt because that is how we do more homes at a time. Responsible debt. We're not over levering, but that's how we reach scale. I did a talk yesterday where I was speaking with entrepreneurs who are starting out in a space, and they were like, how do you keep yourself encouraged? This is such a big challenge. It's so hard. And my answer to them was like, well, I'm encouraged because this is a solvable problem and it's a winnable game. I know it seems daunting, and it is. It's a lot, but it's winnable.
And it's commonplace today to talk about the housing crisis. Housing
Mhm.
costs are going through the roof, and the people can't afford to purchase a home or have
Mhm.
housing security. And these are real problems affecting families across the country. And Parity is an example. It brings the bigger vision, but also real concrete examples. You're also extending an invitation to say,
Mhm.
okay, come, look, you can do this. It's not easy, there's a lot of hard
Right.
work. But
Yeah.
as this gains more and more traction and people start to understand it better, it also becomes more accessible to people.
100%.
So creating 200 homes is an incredible achievement, but you also need to be joined by so many others. So how do more people come and join you in this work?
There's so many ways. One, we're hiring, so go take a look at our website to look at some of our job postings.
Great.
We'd also love volunteers, particularly people who have a specialized skill set that can help us on a project basis. Two, we're always looking for funders, folks who want to be a part of a creative capital stack to do this work at scale. But I think more broadly, I would say that so this like notion of scale, it keeps coming up, and there are pros and cons to scale. I think the cons are that like as a capitalist society, like this push to always scale, do more, I think has great consequences for people and for our planet. But if we're looking at the positive side of scale, it allows us to deliver more impact, change people's lives, get people into healthy homes so that they can live healthy lives. Of course, there's this future where maybe Parity is in Chicago, Parity is in Detroit. We actually open up offices there. That seems like a lot of fun, but that's not the only way to scale. Like maybe in the future, we just decide to create like a toolkit and disseminate that toolkit, and then others apply the toolkit according to their own discretion. But at least we've given the tools. Another way to think about scale is stories. I think you can scale by changing people's hearts and minds, and you change people's hearts and minds through effective storytelling. I think like development without displacement was a term that I started using in like 2018, 2019 that we're seeing. I think that's everyone now knows what development without displacement means. I won't take full credit for it. I'll claim that I contributed to it. And so that's like a small thing where like effective storytelling, people now understand, oh, gentrification isn't a good thing because, oh, if it's pushing people out, no, we don't want gentrification. Yeah, we want a grocery store, but we don't want the harm that comes with it. And so just like changing that shared language and vocabulary I think is really powerful, humanizing people who need affordable housing, but also contextualizing we all need affordable housing. I need affordable housing, you need affordable housing, like just changing the way that this work is talked about so it's not othered, like, oh, those people. No, all of us. Housing is a universal crisis and it's a universal right. And I think that is like a way that we can scale our work that's not super capital intensive. Once you change people's hearts and minds and people make up institutions, people make up systems, then hopefully we'll start to see those systems shift.
We're huge supporters and fans of you and the work that you're doing at Parity, and having seen it in
Likewise.
first person, it's remarkable to see the change you're making and the ripple effects that the story and powerful example are having.
Thank you so much,
Great.
Stuart.
Thank you for taking the time with us today.
Thank you.
This was a very meaningful conversation with Bree. Her work stands as a concrete example of the progress we can make to provide affordable homeownership. It also shows us how we can reclaim and reinvigorate the assets and communities that have been disinvested in. There are at least two other really important lessons we can take away from Bree today. First, she is keenly aware that growing her organization and increasing the number of homes she's developing is only one of the ways that she can scale her impact. She can also scale her impact by sharing the models and tools that she's developed, and by spreading the ideas through stories and the power of example. And by sharing her own story, Bree is implicitly extending each of us an invitation to take a step forward and act. I'm Stuart Yasgur. This is Economic Architecture, the podcast. Stay tuned for future episodes of the Economic Architecture podcast. Available every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, wherever you get your podcasts.